We got some players we love, in terms of upside. We did introduce a wrinkle a couple weeks ago, a little extra risky, like a spicy pick. So, if that's the case, Chris, I figure we can bend the rules just a little bit, right?
Maybe. What do you mean?
I mean, look, it could be any position technically, right?
Not any position, right?
Okay. Oh, come on. Well, let's see who goes off unexpectedly and who has a huge game to help you win in the fantasy playoffs. Here we go, week 16. Booms. Our goal is to help you win your fantasy football league. We also have a personal goal. It's to try to get to 100,000 subscribers by season's end. We're getting there. We are close. Everyone helps though. Look, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please take a second and click that button. So let's start off with some high-end receivers. It always feels risky to play a guy who hasn't been on the field lately, and I know there's always that risk. At least it feels that way with T. Higgins, right? Because, this is just what he does. He's out there most of the time, but, sometimes at the worst moments, you feel like you can't trust him. I think you got to trust him this week. First of all, he's still in that offense. And yes, Joe Burrow, I know you think he might be demotivated. He is still trying to win. I guarantee you that. He will be better this week. And T. Higgins is still one of the best receivers out there when healthy. And it looks like he is on his way back to playing. So that's not really a big concern as far as just being out there and running his usual amount of snaps and routes. And look, T. Higgins was dominating before the concussions. That's what made it such a tough loss, not having T. Higgins the last couple weeks. In the 4 games since the month of November started where he actually has played, he hasn't seen fewer than 6 targets. And he's the wide receiver 6 in fantasy points per game since that time. That means he had been outscoring teammate Jamar Chase over his last 4 games and even Michael Wilson. And you're like, oh, Michael Wilson, a league winner. T. Higgins had been doing even better. Now I get that we haven't seen him the last couple of weeks, but why wouldn't he just go back to being exactly what he was before then? And this matchup really shouldn't scare you away from him.
No, it should not scare you away from it at all. You look at it like recently and think, oh, Miami, they haven't given up a lot of points to wide receivers, but look at who they've played over the last 4 games. They got the Commanders without Terry McLaurin, the Saints, the Jets, and the Steelers last week. So, yeah, they have not played an offense like this Bengals offense. And I know people are going to say, well, what about the Bengals last week? Okay, throw that one out the window. Look at how the Bengals offense looked the previous 2 weeks with a healthy Joe Burrow and a healthy T. Higgins. Maybe they were just missing T. Higgins last week. But also the Dolphins this week, they have nothing to play for anymore. They're out of playoff contention. They're benching Tua. They just released pass rusher Matthew Judon. Safety Minkah Fitzpatrick has a calf injury. He's week to week. Not even sure if he's going to play this week. Probably not. And unlike last week in the freezing cold, it's Miami. It might not be like warm in Miami this time of year, but it's at least not freezing cold. It feels like a good bounce back spot for the Bengals against this Dolphins team that has nothing to play for right now. T. Higgins, a guy I think you got to have him locked in your lineups this week.
Follow that up with another high-end receiver who, despite how good he's been, how high he's finished in terms of fantasy standings for the last few years, there's still trust issues with A.J. Brown because last year, right at this time, even a little bit earlier, he vanished, right? And he does this sometimes. He's very volatile. He's probably the most volatile elite receiver you can think of. The guy can be dominant one game and just vanish the next. Well, he hasn't done it. He's been so consistent lately because the targets are there. The target share is that of an elite receiver, and Philly finally is back in the win column. I know pretty easy against the Raiders, but still. Philadelphia, there's nothing wrong with them. All that panic was for nothing. They are still strong contenders. This offense is not broken. Jalen Hurts is fine. And A.J. Brown has been better probably than most people even realize it. Over the last 4 weeks, he's the wide receiver 2, only behind Puka. He's been the best receiver outside of Puka Nacua, and yet some people still are not convinced whether they absolutely have to play him. You have to play him because he is getting so many targets, averaging 9 per game over the past month, ever since they decided that's what they're committing to, for better or worse. The passing offense is running through AJB. He didn't have a lot last week, so that's probably the only question you have is what happened? Only 2 catches, 41. Here we go again. They didn't have to pass it against the Raiders, okay? No, it feels like it was a smash spot, but game script dictated otherwise. So this week, it seems like it's going to be that perfect balance of good matchup and good game script.
Yeah, the Commanders' offense Not one of the best offenses in the NFL, but certainly much better than the Raiders' offense. But, man, this defense has been terrible this year. You look at it, they've allowed 100 or more receiving yards to every wide receiver group except your Dolphins, which could only muster 94 receiving yards against them. They've allowed 200 or more receiving yards 4 times this year. Also, they play single high at the 13th highest rate. You look at it this year against single high coverage, A.J. Brown ranked 6th among all wide receivers in targets per out run, 11th in yards per out run, and 4th in fantasy points per out run. Last week, like you said, they didn't really have to even do anything in that game. I think the starters were out like in the middle of the third quarter. They just said, like, yeah, we're done. We're good now. Not going to be the case this week, especially because they're in Washington. This might be a sneaky closer game than I think a lot of people think. They're going to need A.J. Brown. He's going to smash against this Commanders defense.
Now, volatile is the word that we always identified with Chris Olave, and it's weird that this year he has turned into Mr. Consistent. I mean, really, truly the epitome of consistency. Not a lot of spikes, but not a lot of down weeks either. Complete opposite of what we've seen from him the last couple of years. We do have a new head coach, of course, new quarterback, a lot of new things in New Orleans, except for Chris Olave. But again, he's just been so consistent. You're like, fine, I can put him in my lineup, and I know I'll get some points. It doesn't excite me too much. I mean, is he really going to boom? Is he a guy who's going to help lead me to the championship? Well, obviously, we're going to tell you that he can, because even though we haven't seen a lot of spikes, and look, Tyler Shough is clearly better than Spencer Rattler, even then, Chris Olave has been doing the exact same thing. With Rattler at quarterback, Olave was averaging 14.9 fantasy points per game in PPR. With Tyler Shough, he's averaging 14.6 fantasy points per game. Again, it's almost crazy exactly how consistent he has been. Only one 100-yard game on the season, only one multi-touchdown game in the season. It's fair to question how he have a big week all of a sudden when he hasn't been doing it all year. Well, it's the Jets.
Yeah, it's the Jets. Look, the defense is a mess, probably worse than the Commander. Worse than the Commanders. They just fired their defensive coordinator. They just gave up essentially a 50-burger to the Jags last week. And you look at it over the last 2 games, the wide receiver ones they've faced. 2 weeks ago, Jalen Waddle went 5 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown. Last week, Jacoby Myers, BTJ, kind of both the ones here, combined for 9 catches, 137 yards, and a touchdown. You look at their secondary right now, obviously traded away Sauce Gardner. Their highest graded corner, Brandon Stevens, has allowed 6 catches for 86 yards on 7 targets over the last 2 games. Their other top 2 starting corners, Jarvis Brownlee and Azare Thomas, are both on IR right now. They're running out backup corners out there. And you didn't mention this, but Devon Villay already has been ruled out for Week 16. So really, who is taking targets from Chris Olave this week? Like Juwan Johnson, that's it, right? Juwan Johnson, he's not going to get it. This should be, if not Chris Olave's best game of the season, up there with one of his best games of the entire year.
All right, now it's time to switch up and go with a running back here. And it feels weird that we actually can talk about Jonathan Taylor, but we need to because, understandably, a guy who you thought was going to carry your fantasy team and his team on his back all the way through the playoffs, not so much anymore. Who would have thought that anybody would miss Daniel Jones so much? The Colts clearly do. And so JT, there was good and bad last week with Phillip Rivers at quarterback. The good news is he got a ton of volume because they don't really want Phillip Rivers to have to try to win the game. They're trying to get it out of his hands as quickly as possible. So the volume was there. 25 carries. He'd seen that before, right? This is a workhorse back, so it's not that unusual. But again, 25 carries and the 4 targets. He did manage to get over 100 scrimmage yards, but that's more of a high floor. You got to wonder what's the ceiling here. But the thing is, they're probably going to do this again, feed him even more if possible, because when you think about the 25 carries, that's not extreme. But JT and Amir Abdullah, the backup there, combined for 29 carries. Meanwhile, they only had 27 pass attempts. And mind you, this was against a really, really tough run defense. You don't attack Seattle's defense by running the ball. And so I can imagine they're going to try to run the ball even more this week. The downside is you wonder what is, his ceiling. Can he score a touchdown? This is a guy who had 3 touchdown games throughout the season, but all of a sudden over the past month, He's only scored 1 in those past 4 games combined. Is he going to break that streak this week and actually go for a big game, maybe find the end zone? We think he can.
Yeah, I think he can because he gets a much, much better matchup against the 49ers this week. You look at it since they lost Fred Warner there, one of the best linebackers in football. They're allowing the 16th most points to running backs, but they've been even more decimated by injury. Over the last 4 games, they've been one of the worst running defenses here. They're allowing the second highest yards per carry at 5.72 over the last month. That is second only behind the Giants. And the teams they faced over that stretch is the Cardinals, the Panthers, the Browns, and the Titans. Not exactly like running juggernauts here. Not teams that are known for their running games. Not really known for anything, to be honest. And they still could not shut down these running games. Go back to week 13 before the bye. They allowed Quinshon Judkins to run for 91 yards and 3.96 yards per carry. Now, you're probably saying 3.96 yards per carry, that's nothing special. Well, keep in mind the last 2 games, Quinshon Judkins has run for 1.8 and 1.9 yards per carry. So that's like running for 10 yards per carry for Quinshon Judkins. And last week, on just 14 carries, Tony Pollard went over 100 yards and had a touchdown against this defense. Jonathan Taylor, like you said, he's going to be the entire offense here. It doesn't even matter if the 49ers know it's coming because unlike last week when he faced one of the best run defenses, he gets one of the worst. He's going to run wild all over these 49ers.
All right, let's get a little riskier here. These are big name players, but guys who have just not done a whole lot lately. We figured this could be the week they break out of it and go off. So not 1 but 2 spicy picks. We'll save the better one for last. Let's start with a guy you didn't think really would be that spicy or all that risky at all this year, Ladd McConkey. I mean, you figured this would be a guy who was solid, consistent every week, getting that target share, right? Maybe being the focal point of that passing offense. What has happened over the past month? It's like Ladd has disappeared. A lot of those receivers have disappeared. It's not just him. But you figure if anybody would have that high floor, you thought it would be McConkey, and it really hasn't been. Over the last 4 games, a total of 10 receptions and 84 yards. A total of 84 yards. You know how bad that is? That's even less than Justin Jefferson. And I'm actually being serious. That's an insult. So the annoying thing here is that it's kind of working because the Chargers keep winning. They're on the way to the playoffs. They've won 6 of their last 7 games. They got Omari and Hampton back. Again, it's fair to question, how can I trust Ladd? But also, why would it change this week? It's the matchup, of course.
Yeah, it's the matchup here. We're banking on the matchup here against this Dallas Cowboys defense that, they just gave up, big games to, big game Jalen Naylor, a nice game to Jordan Addison, 2 touchdowns through the air to J.J. McCarthy. Plus, over the last 4 games, they've allowed the most fantasy points to slot wide receivers. Ladd currently playing in the slot 63% of the time, but over the last month, that number has actually gone up to 65%. But what I really like about Ladd this week is the Cowboys, who earlier in the year were one of the heaviest zone teams, have been playing a ton of more man lately. Over the last 3 games, they're only 21st in zone percentage, 13th in man percentage. But last week, they played the 6th most man of any defense. And Ladd this year has been much better against man. He has a 0.25 targets per out run, 2.03 yards per out run, and 0.41 fantasy points per out run versus man. Those numbers dropped to 0.18, 1.29, and 0.27 versus zone. Ladd destroys man coverage. The Cowboys don't have anybody that can cover Ladd out of the slot. Every QB, every passing game that faces the Cowboys goes off. I feel like it's worth taking a chance on Ladd this week if you're looking for that upside flex.
All right, then spicy pick number 2. But this is going to be a little confusing, so bear with me. I'm going to pick a player that is the second highest scoring player in his position for the season. Yeah. But I'm also picking a tight end because, Chris, you agree with me. This could be the week where finally we actually feel really good about starting Travis Kelce. Because it's weird, then again, I kind of had to do a double take. He's really the tight end 2 in PPR. He is. He's very distant from Trey McBride, the tight end 1, kind of like all other tight ends are. I mean, this really just tells you the state of the tight end position this season. So many big name busts. You can just call them busts, right? You draft them early. Brock Bowers did not deliver exactly what you expected. TJ Hawkinson is a complete non-factor. George Kittle was hurt. It's just, this is not a good year to draft early tight end. Who would have thought? So Travis Kelce has been consistent enough, but now all of a sudden Pat Mahomes is done for the season. Why are we in on Travis Kelce now all of a sudden? Not because we think Gardner Minshew is an upgrade, but a couple of things. First of all, Gardner Minshew might have to look to Travis Kelce a lot more because, number one, arm strength might be an issue. And number two, all of a sudden Rashee Rice is in the concussion protocol magically after the Mahomes injury and the Chiefs being eliminated from the playoffs. Look, for what it's worth, Kelce, he may be playing out his career here. There's no guarantee he comes back, especially now knowing the Mahomes news. Maybe he wants to go out in style. Maybe he's going to make the most of his last couple of games. And maybe this actually is a good week for him based on all the circumstances.
Yeah, I think this could be a great week for Travis Kelce, actually, because everything you said, Minshew, noodle arm, Rashee Rice, I mean, getting put in the concussion protocol like on Monday is never good, right? He had concussion symptoms on Monday, almost certainly not going to play this week. And he gets a fantastic matchup against the Tennessee Titans, who are 7th worst versus tight ends, but are 2nd worst over the last 2 games. And you look at it over that stretch, they allowed Harold Fannin to go for 8 catches, 114 yards, and a touchdown. And George Kittle went for 8 catches, 88 yards, and a touchdown. And if you go back to 3 weeks ago, Brenton Strange, who has done nothing since that Tennessee game, had 3 catches, 45 yards, and a touchdown. They've allowed a touchdown to at least one touchdown to tight ends in 3 straight games. Remember in that Browns game, they also allowed David Njoku to catch a touchdown on his only catch of the game before he got hurt and is out for the season. Like, Tennessee cannot cover the tight end position. Gardner Minshew cannot throw the ball deep to anybody. He's just going to be relentlessly throwing it to Kelce. It felt like Kelce got targeted on every Gardner Minshew pass when he came in. I think that's how it's going to be this week. Just going to get a ton of targets and a matchup where the Titans have no chance against them. I think Kelce is a tight end you could trust, even in this Chiefs offense.
All right, we're not done yet, though. We're each going to identify one more player we like this week. All right, Chris, you're up.
All right, I'm going back to the well a little bit here. Remember, a couple weeks ago, I said whoever's the wide receiver one for the Cardinals, they have to be in your lineup. Well, I'm telling you again, whoever is the wide receiver one for the Cardinals this week has to be in your lineup. Since week 9, here's how the Cardinals wide receiver one has finished. Week 9, Marvin Harrison had 10 targets, 7 catches, 96 yards, and a touchdown, was the wide receiver 6. In week 10, he had 12 targets, 3 catches, 33 yards, and a touchdown, was the wide receiver 24. Week 11, Michael Wilson, 18 targets, 15 catches, 185 yards, finishes the wide receiver 1. Week 12, 15 targets, 10 catches, 118 yards, finishes the wide receiver 9. Week 13, Marvin Harrison in just 3 quarters. Remember, he only played 3 quarters. Had 7 targets, 6 catches, 69 yards, and finished as a wide receiver 24 in only 3 quarters. Week 14, Michael Wilson again, 16 targets, 11 catches, 142 yards. Another wide receiver 1 finish. And then last week against the Texans, we were like, ooh, a little nervous here. It didn't matter. 11 targets, 5 catches, 54 yards, and a touchdown. The wide receiver 17 against the best pass defense in the NFL. And now they get the Atlanta Falcons, who are allowing the 4th most points to wide receivers over the last 4 games, the 2nd most points over the last 2 games. They've allowed over 200 receiving yards to wide receivers to the Seahawks and the Buccaneers in each of the last 2 games. Look, I really hope it's Michael Wilson, because if Marvin Harrison is out, we know this guy's probably going to get 15 plus targets and just go absolutely crazy this week. But I think if Michael Harrison does return, and obviously the time we're filming, we don't know. At the time you're watching this, we may still not know. But I think if Marvin Harrison comes back, he's an absolute must start. So whoever's healthy for this team, whether it's Harrison or Wilson, you got to have these guys in your lineup this week. They are going to smash.
All right, I'm going to get a little deeper here. A guy that, look, honestly, he's been barely flex worthy for most of the season. But I'm just going to throw out there and be honest. At this point, I'm looking at the schedule. Who in the running back position is playing the very worst defense of all, the New York Giants? It's the Vikings. I'm going with Aaron Jones. It's that simple, because that is how bad the Giants have been against the run lately. We just saw Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who, let's face it, you forgot he existed, right? You had no interest in Bill for weeks because he had done nothing. He'd fallen behind Chris Rodriguez on the depth chart, and he almost had 100 yards and a touchdown on the ground, not even 20 carries against this Giants defense. They're allowing 6.3 yards per carry to running backs over the last 2 months. they've been consistently demolished on the ground, and not even by superior running backs. This isn't like, oh, well, they faced Bijan Robinson. No, they give up 100 yards nearly to Bill. Omarion Hampton's only 100-yard game of the season, his best game by far, came against this Giants defense. Tank Bigsby, the backup to Saquon Barkley, he had a 100-yard game on the ground after Saquon already had like 150 yards on the ground against this defense in the same game. And Jahmyr Gibbs had his 200-yard game against this Giants defense. So clearly, Giants defense bad against the run. Aaron Jones is still the 1A here. And Aaron Jones, for what it's worth, I mean, he's doing what he can given the state of this offense and the quarterback position. He's averaging 4.5 yards per carry. If you take out that one game with Max Brosmer where he couldn't even get a yard per carry. I mean, look, J.J. McCarthy has been less worse lately, but let's not pretend he's a great quarterback because he's not. They're going to be able to run the ball here with Aaron Jones. And for what it's worth, the Giants, as bad as they are on defense and not that great on offense, for some reason they just run as many plays as possible. They have one of the fastest pace of plays here, and so this game might not be a slog. I think Aaron Jones will get enough opportunities, and he could definitely break off a big one. I need upside. You want to win a championship. You want a big game. You need that upside. A running back who is still pretty good against by far the worst run defense in the league, that's the recipe for a big game. All right, those players could help you win this week and get you at least one step closer to the championship, if not take the whole thing home. So don't forget, you got to get it right at every position. We have start, sit, and so much more for you in this week's playlist.